Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of CouncilMatters. I'm Mick Fitzgerald and we're delighted to introduce our guest in the studio, who is former Labour Party councillor for Ballyfermot, Drimnagh, Michael O'Sullivan.
Thanks, Michael.
Welcome back again, Michael.
Thank you.
Just to fill in people, Michael, before we go on, people who know me on social media know I'm a bit of a beast, but not to be taken too seriously. But one of the things I always say is that if you don't like anything I say, I will always give the right of reply. You're one of the few people, actually, Michael, who has had the courage, so I certainly was not going to turn you down, so well done.
No problem. I'm always happy to respond to...
Yeah. A couple of things, Michael, just to start off. I mean, people forget at the end of the day, politicians are human. I know that sounds, because we tend to see politicians as figures, because that's where we get them. So, you were on the council last year. We had you in before the council elections. How did that, from a personal point of view, how disappointing was that? Because people think, oh well, politics goes on, but I mean, we have to think of the person.
Well, absolutely, and I think I had to say a realistic view of my chances were at the time, so it wasn't that it was a surprise. I was actually one of the Labour people who was quite close to getting elected. I got to
you were one away.
So yeah, indeed, maybe about 100 votes away. Yeah. But and nobody likes to do something that they don't succeed. And I had worked hard. I would say there were other Labour councillors that I knew who had been there longer and had worked hard. Guys like John Redmond and others who had worked decently and hard for a long time. But but the other bit of it is that is what people know. That's what I won't say game. It's not a game, but I think you're right to say that it is actually about people.
It is. It's very much so.
And I think one of the things that has been difficult for Labour people the last few years is, look, people can agree, disagree, like us, dislike us, but there's been a degree of venom in terms of how people have approached either social media or personally. We were out canvassing recently in Crumlin, and we were actually getting a reasonable, I'd say a reception as we used to get back pre-whatever. The next thing we were descended upon by a crowd.
A spontaneous crowd,
they came from a water protest. But the level of abuse and physical threatening was, it's up on Facebook. I was approached last night by a local Sinn Féin activist who had seen it, who say, look, that's really beyond the beyond.
Yeah.
And as I say, there was a politician out. I don't know what to describe myself as. I'm a former politician. I don't know, but there were also people who just join political parties because they believe in them, and they're ordinary civilians. And I think that's something that we actually need to look at a bit.
Well, I think the most blatant case of that was what we saw last year with the Martina Ginocchi case. When,
it was
that to me was. That really was taking it to a degree that it
same
should
people
be.
with the same group, and that sort of thing is going on all the time. Now, as I say, we got calls from local people then afterwards to say, look, that was terrible. The people that we were canvassing the area for, who aren't necessarily Labour supporters, but look, that's a small group of people. It doesn't represent, nor does that take away from the fact that people are legitimately angry about lots of things. And but as you know, Michael, I'm very happy, to listen to people, take on board what they say, and I suppose at the same time, I won't say defend, because defend sounds defensive, but try to explain to people the context of a lot of decisions, and maybe some of the things they don't know that were done.
Okay, let's look at something else, Michael, and this is again, I don't know your personal circumstances, but what I'm hearing out on the north side, with councillors who lost their seats the last time round, they lost their seats, but now look at them, they're in these voluntary community jobs that are being paid, 35 to 40,000, and is that an exception?
I think probably. I was working full time in my own job all the time, and I couldn't afford not to be doing that. Yeah. So I went back to working full time.
No, but if you take my point, there's a perception that the system, or the if you like, the political class, looks after its own, irrespective of parties.
I don't really agree with that. I would say, and again, my experience at Dublin City Council was that people from all the parties worked hard. Parties I wouldn't agree with. They worked hard. They worked long hours. even after you're a councillor, you will still get, you know, phone calls. I got phone calls 11, 12, but I got a phone call at 1 o'clock in the morning. You know, and that happens all the time. And you're expected then to be, and which is fine. I'm not complaining about it. You have to become experts on a whole range of things that you may not have known about. You have to go to endless meetings. If you don't turn up to a community meeting, you know, you will go and see social media. So I wouldn't be crying for them, but the notion that somehow it's a cushy number, anybody who makes it a cushy number isn't going to get elected. And even if you work hard, as I think I did, there's no guarantee you get elected either. So which is proper, and I'm not complaining.
Okay, well, if it's any consolation, Michael, and I know it may not be scant consolation, what I have spoken to people, and there is, I would say, a degree of sadness that you didn't get returned, and you certainly come out of it with your respect intact. I think that's an important thing at the end of the day.
I appreciate that, Michael. Yeah.
Let's talk about, particularly, we're going to have a new election in the next few months, one way or the other, whether it's next month or whether it's early next year.
Late February.
Yeah. The word I am hearing, and I would take on board that there is organised opposition to Labour, but the word I'm hearing from what I describe as core Labour voters is that somehow or other Labour drifted away from them. In other words, Labour became more of a status quo party than representing their core constituency. How do you feel about that?
Look, I'm always happy to meet Labour voters in the door, even the ones that are given out to me, because look, I think that isn't true. I absolutely don't think that's true. I think what we were very bad at really was being clear to people about what the task was in front of us. So you go back nearly 5. You go back to 2011. It's probably true all the time, but 2011 was even more of a case. It's always the case, if you put a manifesto before people, that you've had the choice of going for Labour. The choice is not putting it into full mode or not. The choice is, can you get some of it done or not? And at any stage, that's always a question of whether you go into government or not. The difficulty this time was that we had a choice. The choice would have been a selfish choice. We could have said we won't go in. I often think, actually, particularly of the younger TDs, you know, guys who got or women who got their seats last time, they would be guaranteed more or less a seat now if they hadn't gone in. Yep. You know, they took on, you know, so the issue I say to people is our choice back, and what I was saying to people on doors with Eric Byrne, who were campaigning for, was saying to on doors was, look, we are in a perilous situation. No matter what we do, the next 3, 5, and actually at the time people were talking about 2 decades up before we get out of it. We are going to face real difficulties. We cannot make it fair. We can try and make it less unfair. And the other thing which we can't walk away from, if we don't go into government, there will not be any stability. We are going to do what happened in Greece was not just what happened to Syriza recently. What happened over the last 5 years in Greece is they didn't actually take on what they needed to do, and they changed government several times. And where are they now? They're signing up to where we were back in 2010.
Over the last, say, year, 18 months, I mean, I've had in a range of people, 3 of whom were former mayors of either South Dublin, North Dublin, or Fingal, Dublin City, all ex-Labour Party. We've also got Tommy Brune, we've got Roisin Shortall, you know, there's a long list.
And I'd say the same thing to all of them. I'd say, what would you do? I mean, what you're actually saying is that that the flack you're going to take because you're going to achieve something is actually, he's going to say, we prefer to achieve nothing. Okay,
well then would you say that they're probably being opportunistic or perhaps even a bit dishonest with the electorate in that sense of the word?
Michael, I don't like to put labels on people. What I would say is they are being unrealistic about what it takes to get real social change. I mean, really, it's one thing to be sitting around and having everybody agree with you and say, look, that's what we want to do. The other thing is, what can you actually do? So take, for example, when we said we're going to try to make things less unfair, what did that actually mean? You know,
well, can I go back to the very beginning to a certain degree of the last campaign? Because listening to Eamon Gilmore, it almost seemed like he was selling a thoroughbred, and we paid the money for a thoroughbred, or at least invested the trust in a thoroughbred, and he delivered a donkey.
Donkeys can have their place in society too, Michael. But again, I often people say, you know, because one of the things I would say that political strategists all over the country would be looking at is hostages to fortune in phrases and so on. So there's a phrase that's thrown out all the time, which is Frankfort's way, or Labour's way.
Okay, well let's just hold that one.
So,
We just put your headphones on, Mark, and I want you to listen to this as a voter,
yes.
not as a Labour Party member.
The first choice that Irish voters are going to have to make in this election is whether our budgets are decided in Frankfort or whether they're decided by the democratically elected government of the Irish people. Now let's be very clear about this. The bad deal that Fianna Fáil made with the EU and the IMF effectively writes the budgets for the next 4 years. Fianna Fáil are prepared to follow those budgetary straitjackets that have been laid down by the EU and the IMF. That's Fianna Fáil's manifesto. They'll take the skilling and follow the drum. And it appears to us that Fine Gael are essentially taking the same approach because they accept the 9 billion target that is in that prescription. Now let's be clear too. If as a country we accept the budget based on the EU-IMF deal, it will mean more of the same that we got in December. It'll mean more taxes, more cuts, high unemployment and no recovery. This election, therefore, is about a choice to be made by the Irish people about whether our budgets and our financial affairs are going to be done Frankfort's way or the way that the Labour Party is proposing. And that choice comes down to the choice between the 9 billion, which has been accepted on a consensus basis by both Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael, or the package of measures that the Labour Party is proposing here today and which Joan will outline to you in a few minutes. There are essentially three things we are saying here. Firstly, the deal with the EU and the IMF must be renegotiated. Labour is putting forward the basis for its renegotiation, and we're asking every single voter in the country to support us on this. Frankfort's way or Labour's way.
How does that sound?
What it sounds is what it's. I wouldn't take that high rhetorical slang. But actually, listen to what he said.
Well, he said there'd be no recovery. Now you're going in on a campaign that there will be.
There is a recovery.
Yeah, but he was saying if you went down that path, there wouldn't be a recovery.
No, but we didn't actually go down. There were changes made.
Yeah.
Okay, the first change was made, which was in terms of the budgetary constraints, was there was an extra year given to meet them.
Mm-hmm.
So that immediately means, so if you have to make an adjustment and you're given an extra year to make it, that actually means that the choices you make are slightly easier choices.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing was that Frankfort had insisted that there was no change on the promissory notes deal. The promissory notes deal meant, if it had been kept, it meant that 3 billion every year, we'd have to find 3 billion. That's gone. Okay. There was a number of other issues in the MOU. But the MOU is the Memorandum of Understanding, the agreement that Fianna Fáil and Greens had signed up to. So I'll go through. And some of the things are things that, like as I said, we were very clear that we would have to work the bailout, but we tried to work it fairer. So you take the property tax. The figure in the memorandum for the property tax, the figure at the moment is you're charged 0.18% of what your house is worth, valued at. The figure in the original memorandum was how much? It was 0.5%. So no, but I think, Michael, there's no point in it. Just to be clear.
Okay.
So my house, I live in Drimnagh.
Yeah.
I pay about I think it's €300, and then they took money off it, which I didn't agree with. But anyway, €300. If it was under the memorandum that had been signed, I would have been paying more or less 3 times. I've been paying €1,000.
Okay. On that basis, then, Mark, and this is. The property tax is probably my biggest gripe about the Labour Party, leaving the USC aside. When you bought your house in Drimnagh, and I got my house in Clontarf, did you make a property investment or did you buy a family home? And that's the big issue I have, is that Labour essentially took the family home out of the equation.
I could debate. There's a debate about property tax. Look, I can tell you what I bought my family home in Drimnagh for €30,000 back in 1987. I think it was. No, it was 1990. Okay, at one stage it was worth close to $500,000. that is an asset. Now, whether I bought it as an asset or not, I didn't. I never intend leaving it. And when people used to say to me, as many people did, left and sold their house in Drimnagh or Crumlin or wherever and moved down to Portlaoise into a 5-bedroom mansion, and they were very unhappy down there and moved back. But the reality was, it was an asset. I would prefer a more and the Labour Party on the council put forward a more nuanced property tax. But I wouldn't give in to saying that a house that you buy is somehow not an asset. But go back. But again, in terms of actually this, and this has been realistic, a property tax was agreed to. It was agreed to come in 2012. It was agreed to have a rate of 0.5%. So the issue for Labour going into government was that we couldn't. As I said, I would be happy that we would maybe look at the property tax again and have a whole range of differences to it. But any of the differences we have, we could have brought in, would have meant more people would have paid more money. And the issue for us was we had to comply with the memorandum of understanding to bring in a property tax, and then we had to do it. As I said, we had to do it in a way that we felt was less unfair. And here, a classic example of this was we got a 1-year derogation from it. It was meant to come in 2012. Okay, we said we're not going to bring it in 2012, but what we will do to get the derogation is we'll charge everybody €100. We were excoriated for that. Now, I used to say to people said that's not fair, and I said it isn't fair. But you know what? If I was to make that fair, for me making it fair means I wouldn't pay 100, I'd pay 300.
Yeah.
Everybody would have paid more.
Sure. Yeah.
And so there's an element of thinking that maybe we got the politics wrong. Maybe we should said to people, well, you know.
Yeah. To me, it was a stealth wealth tax. You could have brought it in and say we're going to do it under. Yeah, I appreciate that. But it could have been. You could have done a. You could have drawn a line and say nothing under $500,000. In which case, then you really are hitting wealthy
listen,
people.
I think there are, and I'm hopeful that we'll get to a stage where we can have the sort of arguments other European countries have about left and right about stuff like property tax, and every country has some sort of a house asset tax, and that's the reality. And to pretend that in this country we can try to provide the level of social services that I as a Labour Party person wants, and civic services, that we can do that on the tax base that we had previously is just fooling people.
Sure. Okay. One of the issues when I go around and I talk to people, particularly people who I would say are dyed-in-the-wool Labour Party voters, the one thing they all say to me is not some, to a certain degree, broken promises, but we're used to that. And I took this up with our mutual friend Dermot Lacey last year about Pat Rabbitte, and I said, if you treat the electorate as a mug, you deserve what you get. And he was saying, oh, well, Pat didn't do that. I just want to play this for a second, Brian, what Pat actually said, because Dermot he contradicted me. This is what Pat said, and I just wonder, do you feel he treated the electorate as a mug on this one?
Principles, or do you actually have red line issues anymore?
We, against all of the odds, protected core social welfare rates. That was a profound commitment. And
do you accept your broken promises? Clearly understandable and understood promises.
Well, at this stage of the lifetime of the government, clearly we had to find money somewhere, and clearly some of them are a breach of the promise. But as I said in the Dáil, when the facts change, I change my mind. I don't know what you do. The fact that the European economy, we couldn't predict 2 years ago that the European economy was going to be in recession.
You could predict nothing with certainty 2 years ago.
But that is the point. You can't predict it with certainty.
But you predicted with certainty there'd be no cuts in child benefit if you were in government.
Well, the situation on child benefit, Sean, is that the debate is running for a very long time about whether the best off people in our society should be in receipt of child benefit. And there is a report under the chairmanship of Ita Mangan completed. And
but that's you didn't go into all that detail before the election. You kept it really simple. Protect child benefit, vote Labour.
Yeah, well, I mean, isn't that what you tend to do during an election?
But that...
Again, when you hear that, Michael, it's not pretty.
No, it's not. But look, what he effectively said is true. But look, you know, he's been hammered for the way he said it. Peter had to take a bit more time to explain to people exactly what is true. Here's the thing, though: if the Labour Party had got not what they did get, which is a fifth of the vote, if they had got what Fine Gael had got and were in a position that we would have done that at the time of that decision of the 5%, there was an argument going on at the time between Labour and Fine Gael in relation to child benefit, social welfare versus we wanted at the time, we proposed, I remember, 3% on people earning over 100,000 on the USC.
Sure.
Okay, so there you go.
Okay.
But I think you put your finger on something in relation to the next election and maybe really the reality elections here. Manifestos in a situation where nobody is ever going to be in a position.
They're
nobody's
really aspirational in effect.
Of course they are. They're saying this is what the policies we do, but the problem is that's not much good because people read them, and that's what he effectively was saying. Is that's what you do. You say, look, if we were running the country, this is what we do.
Yeah. But doesn't that make it a problem going into this election?
It makes it a real problem for democratic politics. But here's the thing: if you went to the Fine Gael manifesto and say the things that they didn't deliver on, that in some cases we stopped them not delivering on, and we're happy that they didn't deliver on. Nobody's going back to Fine Gael saying you didn't deliver on that. Yeah. Because the reality is, as I said, well, and I think aspirational parties, as I call Labour, that are going to be hit because they're going to be saying, you wanted to make things better and you didn't make it quite as better as you promised you do. Okay. But as I say, I do think there's a real problem, and I know internally with ourselves, I've been saying, look, we need to be very clear about what it is that we say in terms of when these are not promises. John Horgan had an article in the paper earlier the week to say they're policy statements, not promises. But the reality is, you make a policy statement pre-election, and if you're in government, you don't deliver it. People call it a broken promise, and that is a problem.
Okay, one of the things, and this is something I've only particularly observed over the last, say, 6 months or so, in the sense that I'm not going to go into the issue of the Jobstown because some of that's before the courts, but some of the, shall we say, and it's beyond criticism, at John Burton and later on what we saw at Catherine Zappone, coming from certain quarters, it's getting pretty close to misogynistic. In other words, there's a danger that we suddenly start attacking people because of their gender rather than because of their policies. Is that something that you would be conscious of as you go around, Michael? In a way, Mary Lou MacDonald hasn't really been, other than from political side.
Certainly, and I think there was the video last year in the council elections of Martina Giannacchi.
Yes, we mentioned that.
So there have been. What I think is that there has been a tactic by some political forces, and they think it's a legitimate tactic. I question it, to say that targeting individual people. I had it outside. I ran a clinic down on Sundrive Road, where you would have, and clinics, political clinics are probably a thing of bygone days. They if you're being very realistic about it, I don't think they bring people votes. But a lot of the people who come to them are vulnerable people who are looking for services and help, and you try and give your time to that. They had to go through a sort of a phalanx of people shouting and roaring, sometimes spitting, waving, banging placards against the window, and so on. Some people think that's a legitimate way of engaging in political. I don't, but unfortunately it also does attract people who are head up about a lot of things, and some of those people have been misogynistic, have been a disgrace, really. Okay,
something to ask you then, Michael. I'm in Dublin Bay North, and I've got a choice of 3 Labour Party candidates at this stage. I've got the Orthodox Labour Party with Aodhán Ó Ríordáin, what I probably would call the Evangelical Party with Cian O'Callaghan. No, they're
I'm joking.
They're a different group altogether.
And then I'm half joking.
Yeah, and then
of pure as I'm pure.
Yeah, and then we've probably got how would I call it, the Anglican version with Tommy Bruin in that sense of the word. Now, why should I go for the Orthodox? Simply because he has more of a likelihood of being in a coalition?
I think that's an issue. First I think of the 3 people, I know all 3.
Yeah.
I actually don't know Tommy that well, and I do know Cian. I think he's a decent person and does by his own lights. I think Aodhán is an excellent politician. So just on the merits, I would vote for Aodhán. But I actually believe in the merits of political parties and political parties who are prepared to actually do what politicians are meant to do, which is to try and wield power to make an improvement. I think that's a huge issue. I would say if I was talking to Cian and talking to Tommy, but certainly I was talking to people who've gone to the Social Democrats, there's a real issue about saying, are you prepared to take the belts that you're going to take because you're saying that actually I want to actually make a difference. It may be different if there's. I'm of the view, Michael, that there are basically 3 possible strands in Irish politics. There's a Social Democratic strand, and all the people you mentioned, I think, could be under the same umbrella happily. There's a right of centre and an increasingly libertarian strand, and Renew and Fine Gael have that between them, and there's a what I call a Gaullist strand, which is a sort of a populist Republican bit of whatever you're having yourself and so on. And Fine Gael, Sinn Féin and Fianna Fáil, who watch that space. But I would be happy. But the issue there for me is actually, are you prepared to vote for politicians who will actually take the digs? And I actually don't think, to be fair, Labour politicians have given enough kudos for saying, when they could have cut and run, when they could have looked after themselves, they didn't. Okay. And one thing politicians people give out to them is that they look after themselves. Okay. If Labour people were looking after themselves, they'd have jumped ship. Okay. Last question then, Michael. You're running on a joint ticket, or at least you're recommending a joint ticket, a joint platform. I don't know the presentation of that. Yeah. Well, look. Here's the thing. But what would you say then to me is that would you prefer that I voted Labour 1 and maybe Richard Bruton 2, or should I go with the other 2 Labour before I go to Fine Gael? Never tell people. I would tell people to vote for Labour. That's what I do. But what I do say to people have to have a mind. About where they see the government going after that. Yeah. I think that's a real question. And I think, as I say, I look at the budget, and we were having a discussion ourselves locally about the budget yesterday. There are things that I like in it, there are things that are not so, there are things that are missed, out which the prescription charges issue had been dealt with. But I think it's obvious at the moment that there is a severe difference of opinion between Labour and Fine Gael in relation to how we see the whole housing and rental situation being developed. Okay. So I hope we go into the election of being clear to people that if they're voting Labour, this is the direction Labour want to go. Okay. We're going to have to go for now, Michael, but I'll give you an opportunity to come back before the election, because you're such a good speaker. But it's been enlightening talking to former Councillor Michael O'Sullivan. I want to thank Brian on the desk, and don't go anywhere. Sean Brophy will be coming up with midweek music miscellany on McFitz, and I won't be back next week, but I'll be back in a couple of weeks. You take care.